So welcome to Adult Grammar School online digital classes. And I still remember your biology teacher, Miss Anya EE. If you can come to memory back, last time we discussed homeostasis and we mentioned some organs that are involved in homeostasis. And by God's grace, we have dealt on two of them, that is the kidney and the liver. And today we want to look at the skin. Now the skin, we have seen also the skin as the organ of excretion. I want to see it now as well as the organ of homeostasis. Now the skin happens to be the largest single organ in the body. Now when we say the largest single organ on the body, there is no joint, there is no where it joined together. It's only if you skin, you find that you only see the point where the hand comes from. And as it were. So we said it's the largest single organ of the body and also consists of, carries out many functions to help in the regulation of the internal environment. Now when we look at the structure of a typical mammalian skin, using that as an example to talk about other skins, we'll find out that the skin consists of two main parts. The outermost parts and the innermost parts. Now on the board I have a structure here showing the structure of a typical mammalian skin. I said it consists of two main layers. The first one is the outermost part known as the epidermis, and the second one is the innermost part known as the dermis. Now if we have the skin consisting of two main parts, but before we get to that, I would like you to listen to me very carefully what we need to achieve and what I want you to understand. I want to believe that you're sitting down calmly with your Bible and your pencil beside you and your script, that you need to jot down some things. There might not be much time to give you a full note on what I'm talking about, but just give me your ear. So when we look at objective one, we'll talk about the structure. You must have an idea or be able to draw the structure representing a mammalian skin. Not only that, when you draw the structures that they are the level parts, which indicates the parts that make up the mammalian skin, and as well, you have to know the functions of these parts. So listing the parts of the skin and explain the function of the skin. Now, if the skin is part of the organ of homeostasis, to make sure there must be a way to maintain a constant internal cell environment, then you must know how to take care of the skin. Now let's go back to the skin. Like I said earlier on, it is the largest organ, largest single organ in animal. Not only that, it is a complex organ that shows many variations. And when we talk about the variation that it shows in terms of color, in terms of race, in terms of sex, in terms of age. If I stand here, probably showing only my hand, and I bring the hand of little Esther beside it, you didn't see our body, neither did you see our face. But by my looking at our hands placed on the table, you'll be able to dictate and say, this is an elderly person. And that's when it comes to age. Now, like I said, many variations depending on the part of the body, depending on the race. If I stand and somebody from China stands, you'll be able to say that this person is an African or a black person and the other person is from an Asia. That depends because of the structure or because of the skin. Now, we'll also talk about, it shows its variation by sex. Sex means male and female. You know, female, they look so gorgeous, they look supple, they look beautiful. By the time I place my hand on a table, and Mr. Bankole placed his own hand on the table as well, without seeing Mr. Bankole or seeing me, you'll be able to say, this one your uncle hand. What do I mean by that? Is a male hand that does a lot of strong work. Am I communicating? I want to believe I'm communicating. That's in terms of sex. And again, when we talk about climate, these are part of the thing. The climate where we find ourselves also shows in the variation of the type of skin that we have. But don't forget, it is the single largest organ of the body, giving a covering, protecting the internal environment of the organism. That is an external environment that we see. Now, going back to a typical structure of a mammalian skin, we said it consists of two main parts. The first one is what we call the epidermis. The second one is what we call the dermis. Now, the epidermis happens to be the outermost part of the skin, giving a coverage or protecting the inner part of the skin. You find out that every other organ of the skin is embedded or found inside, being covered externally by the skin. Then the second one is the dermis. The dermis is innermost parts of the skin embedded inside. Then we have to take them one by one. Let's start from the epidermis. The epidermis. I said the epidermis is the innermost part or the outermost part of the skin, giving a large coverage of the skin. And not only that, the epidermis, as it were, like we told, shows a lot of part. We call it an external covering of the internal environment of part of the skin, and also shows various thickness depending on the area is highly exposed to pressure. I repeat myself. I said the epidermis is the outer part of the skin, giving an external coverage or protecting the inner part of the skin, but they vary in thickness, and this variation in thickness is as a result of the areas mostly exposed or constantly exposed to pressure. For example, the sole of our feet. If you touch the sole of your feet and touch probably the stomach area or the skin part of the hand, you find out that that area is softer than the sole of the feet. And another one is the palm. The palm of the hand is also strong because we always use it to carry out most work. So the area highly exposed to constant pressure shows or vary in thickness. So these two areas are the most thickest parts of the skin. Now the epidermis also, like I said, shows variation in thickness because of the areas that are constantly exposed to pressure. Now this epidermis, or let's say epidermal layer, consists of three main layers. They're made up of three main layers. The first one is the outermost layer. The outermost layer known as conified or horny layer. The second one is the middle layer. We have the middle layer. The middle layer is called the granular layer. Granular layer. The third one is the innermost part of the epidermis. The innermost part, innermost layer, known as the Malpighian layer. Malpighian. Let me write it here. Malpighian layer. This is the part that finally leads, or the last area leads to the inner part. Now please take note of this. And as I'm going towards the diagram, I'm pointing at the diagram. Please, there are certain things, like as an examiner, when you're asked such question in biology, when you're asked to draw, you must indicate and show forth clearly the two main parts of the skin, or the two main layers of the skin, which is the epidermis and the dermis. And when you draw it, it must be shown. Like I said, the epidermis consists of three other layers. The outermost layer, which is called the conified layer, which is this one. And also we have the middle layer, known as the granular layer. That is the granular layer. And the other part, known as the Malpighian layer. What did I say? What did I call it? Malpighian layer. Please take note of that. Which is this one here, that have a lot of infolding. Some of them extend right deep into the dermis. Please take note of the spelling. In some of the textbooks, you see it being spelled as M-A-L-H before P. Please, it is wrong. Remember, if you miss any word or add any word in a one-word answer that is not given to you, or it's not expected to be there, you fail it. So take note of that. So let's look at these structures. We say we'll have the first one, the first part, the outer part of the skin, which is the conified layer. Now, the conified layer is the outermost part, made up of dead, scale-like structures. I said is a dead part of the skin, like a dead scale-like structures found in them. And they contain a structure known as a keratin. And this keratin is like a pigment that makes the skin or the outer parts to be waterproof, to be flexible. It makes it waterproof, it makes it flexible, and it makes it tough. I repeat myself. I said that the conifoid layer is a consists of dead-like scales found in them. So this one we see at the outer surface of our skin. The outermost one here is the conifoid layer, and they are dead. And that is why they are constantly being shed off. Remember, I said, in as much as they contain a kind of a pigment, a dead cell is known as the keratin. Now, this keratin makes the skin to be tough. It makes it to be flexible. And it also makes it to be waterproof. What do I mean by waterproof? You know, when you enter the bedroom and you take your bed to pour water on your body, the thing will just flow without entering. Now, flexible enough that it can move. You can squeeze it. And tough enough that at times you throw things and they bounce back. So that is the function of this. And one other thing we know about the conifoid layer, they are constantly being shed off. You know, most time, let me give you the commonest example. There are some soap we use in washing. After washing, you just find out as if your skin is peeling. That is the dead part of the conifoid layer. Now, its major function is to give protection to other parts of the skin. They don't have living cells. They are not living. They don't have anything because they're already dead cells. Then now leads us to the second layer, which is the granular layer. Now, this granular layer has a blood supply on its own. The other one doesn't have. But, sorry, before I go back, the dead part of the conifoid layer, the shed off part, is being replaced with a growing layer, which is the inner part. Then we'll have the granular layer here. It's a living cell. And they are also kind of known as a growing cell. So the dead part of the conifoid layer, when it goes off, it's being replaced by the growing cells, where we have the granular layer. Now that leads us to the last one here, the top part of the layer that makes up the epidermis, that we'll call the Malpighian layer. Now the Malpighian layer consists of living cells. And not only that, they are constantly cuboidal dividing. They divide constantly to replace the worn-out tissues within that grows to found around the conifoid layer. Not only that, they have a lot of infolding. What do I mean infolding? You can see the way they coiled in. Some of them folded in until some enters into the dermis. Now, this infolding results to the formation of what we call sebaceous glands and also the hair follicle. They receive the blood supplies and nutrients directly from the dermis, and that's what makes it possible to supply to the epidermal cells. Am I communicating? Am I communicating? I want to believe if I ask you a question on this area, especially on the three layers that makes up the epidermis, you'll be able to give me a correct answer. God bless you. Esther, I hope you're hearing me. Now that leads us to the second part of the skin, which is the dermis. Now the dermis is found in the inner part of the body, or the skin, consisting of a lot of connective or network of connective tissues. And these tissues there are many, including the blood capillaries. And that is why you have a lot of them containing nourishment and having oxygen that are being supplied to all parts of the skin. Now, what are these tissues that make up the dermis, or the network of connective tissues found in the dermis? I will point it out from the diagram so that I'll be able to see. Remember, from here to here shows the dermis right inner part of the skin. From here to here makes up the epidermis. So the connective tissues that are involved will have the blood vessels, or what we call the blood capillaries. We'll have the hair follicle. We'll have the sebaceous gland. We'll have erector muscles. We'll have the sweat gland. We'll have the sensory nerve endings. We'll have subcutaneous tissues, or what we call the fatty layers. Now, what are the functions? Why are they there? What can you say about them? And one funny thing is that most of the time, the WAEC or NECO might ask you, using a well-labeled diagram of a mammalian skin, explain the following terms. Which means you would have drawn the diagram of the mammalian skin, and they will tell you the terms you have to explain. They might say subcutaneous tissue, they might say sebaceous gland, they might say the hair follicle. Then you should just talk about them. Now let's start from the blood vessels, or what we call the blood capillaries. Now, the blood capillaries are found right deep inside of the skin. What is the function of the blood capillaries? They supply or transport the food, oxygen from the dermis to all parts of the skin. That is to both the dermal cells and the epidermal cells. I hope I'm communicating. We are found scattered inside the body or inside the skin. That's the blood capillaries. And their major function is to supply oxygen and nutrients that tend to nourish the skin as it is, both the epidermal and the dermal ones. The next one we have here is the hair follicle. Now, the hair follicle is formed as a result of the infolding that comes from the Malpighian layer. Remember, the Malpighian layer is part of the epidermal cell or the epidermis. So you found the infolding that result. This is you have the separation that this is the hair follicle inside of it. And this hair follicle appear or contain inside of it a cylindrical structure that results to form what we call the hair itself. And this hair consists of dead cells. If you touch your skin, although in human, if you will have the hair on our head, for so many other vertebrate animals like cow, we have a lot of furs or the hairs surrounding their body. We have little on our hands, although you might see them more on men, on their chest and so other parts. So we have the hair follicle formed as a result of the infolding right deep, infolding of the Malpighian layer right deep. And we have, because of constantly dividing carbonyl cells, you also have a cylindrical structure found inside that place of the hair follicle, extending to the surface of the epidermis, and that is what we call the hair, although it's a dead cell. Am I communicating? Now that leads us to another part of the dermis, and that is the sebaceous gland. Now this sebaceous gland also came up as a result of infolding of the Malpighian layer, and they contain or they secrete an oil found there that helps the skin to be supple, and that is what we call sebum. Sebum. The sebaceous gland, which is formed as a result of the infolding of the Malpighian layer into the skin, is found containing a sebum, or they secrete an oily substance known as the sebum. And this sebum tends to give the skin its smooth nature, and not only that, they tend to trap dust and as well as microorganisms, not allowing it at times. And that's why you see most time on the surface of your skin, you see oily structure. Like most men, they don't use body cream. Most of them don't use body cream. After some time or some hours, you will just see that their face is oily. Where is it from? It's as a result of the secretion made by the sebaceous gland to produce this oily substance known as the sebum. Did I say something now? So that is what, and most time what they do is to attract or trap dust, not allowing it to penetrate into the skin, some microorganisms, not allowing it to penetrate into the skin. Am I communicating? So that is what the sebaceous gland does. And not only that, we also have another structure known as, we have mentioned the blood capillaries, we also have an erectile muscles. Now this erectile muscle attract or extend or comes off from the hair follicle here and links itself to even the epidermis. What does it do? It contracts and relaxes when there is movement or some structure going on within the body. That is what we call the erectile muscles. And not only that, another structure found in the dermis. Remember I said that the dermis consists of so many network of connective tissues. We have looked at the hair follicle, we have looked at the sebaceous gland, we've seen the erectile muscles, and now we want to look at the sweat gland. Now the sweat gland happens to be a coiled structure found right deep inside of the dermis. And what does the sweat gland do as a coil structure? It is surrounded by blood capillaries or blood vessels. And most of the time they absorb water from the surroundings through the blood vessels into the sweat gland. And from the sweat gland, the water or the fluid absorbed from the blood capillaries surrounding the sweat gland moves into what we call the sweat ducts. And from this sweat duct, the water or that fluid substance goes out to the surface of the skin, in the upper part of the skin, through what we call the sweat pore. And that watery substance of the fluid absorbed from, it's as a waste product, absorbed from the surroundings of the blood vessels around it is what we call sweat. Did I say something now? I repeat myself. I said, right also inside the dermis, we see a coiled structure. And that coiled structure is what we call the sweat gland. Now, the sweat gland is surrounded by blood capillaries or blood vessels. Remember, one of the functions of the blood capillaries is to supply oxygen, to supply nutrients, and as well as, I forgot to mention, to remove some waste. Waste like some mineral salts, waste like some commonly known as sweat that the body does not need as it were, and excess water out of the body of a mammal. So this water is being absorbed probably by osmosis, through osmosis from the surroundings of the sweat gland into the sweat gland. And that fluid contains mineral salt, or what you can say, it contains chlorine, it contains some waste, it contains salt, it contains water. And they now extend or move up via a dot known as the sweat dot. Now from this dot, it goes to the surface of the skin via a tiny opening. If you look at your skin very well, you will see something that looks like opening. That is the sweat pores. So when the sweat comes out on the surface, it evaporates to the atmosphere and leaves the skin cool. Did I say something now? Bolaji, I hope you understand me. Now that is it about, and this is how the skin produces sweat or removes sweat as a waste product out of the body of the organism, out of the body of mammal. Another thing that we notice that the skin has is this sensory nerve endings. They have sensory nerves. Sensory nerves for touch. If I touch you, you know I touch you. Sensory nerve for pain. If I touch you and pinch you, you feel the pain. Sensory nerve for cold and hot, that you're feeling cold. The weather is very cold, you're feeling cold or you're feeling hot, and that is for temperature. So they are sensitive to things around us. They'll collect information from the sensory receptors from the skin and send message to the brain for interpretation, and then returns back to the appropriate quarter where things is happening around the skin. Now, what are these sensory nerve or nerve endings that they have? I mentioned the first one, the sensory nerve endings that they have. I've mentioned one of them as sense for pain, and not only that, they have sensory nerve they have for receptors, or how we call it teachers. Teachers. Receptors. I know you might be saying, is it because she's a teacher and she's calling it teacher's receptor? It's not me that is calling it teacher's receptor, that is the name. But for you to understand it easier and to remember it, or we'll call it menescent or pulse. At least you can remember this pulse. If you cannot remember this, you can remember teacher's receptors. And then we'll have pressure receptor. When you feel pressure, pressure receptors, or what we call Pacenia. Or what we call the Pacenia. Okay? Then we'll have pain receptor. Like I said, if I pinch you, or if I decide to flog you, Bolaji, when you disturb my class, You know, as I read the beep, you just do like this. It is those receptors that will carry the message to the brain for interpretation, and that brings about the appropriate quarter. That's when you move. We have the brain receptors, which is a free nerve ending, endings, and then we have thermometer or thermoreceptor. You will know what this one will be doing. That is for temperature. That is for hot and cold weather. Pen receptors. So these ones dictate, they have endings that help to carry messages or informations to the brain interprets it and return it to the appropriate quarters. We said there are 3 of them for pain, touch. This one is for touch. We have pressure receptor, we have pain receptor, we have thermoreceptor, that is for detecting and regulating body temperature. Then the last one, probably among them, we have what we call the subcutaneous tissue. What did I call it? Subcutaneous tissue. If we don't call it subcutaneous tissue, we call it fatty tissue, or we call it adipose. Adipose tissue. That's why we have fats around the body within the skin. What is their function? They insulate. They act as insulator to make sure that we have normal body temperature found around us. So it acts as a long-term food storage and as well as insulating the skin or help us to maintain our body temperature. So that is that about the structures I've just mentioned. I don't think there's anything I left out from the levelings I had there. No. But don't forget that this is the structure and function of the mammalian skin, which is an organ also of homeostasis, helping to regulate the internal environment. Yes, time might not permit us for now to actually look at the cares or probably diseases that are likely to affect the skin and their remedy. But if there is any question on the structures or the functions of the pad leopard, just send me a question or send your complaint to AGS Senior Online classes at gmail.com. Please don't forget that I've been talking concerning the skin as a single largest organ of the body, consisting of 2 major parts, the epidermis and the dermis. And when you look at the epidermis as the outermost layer or the outermost covering of the skin, also consists of 3 main layers. The outermost layer known as the conified or honey layer, the middle layer known as the granular layer, and the innermost part of the skin known as the Malpighian layer. And we saw the dermis as the inner part of the skin, consisting of network of capillaries or network of tissues around them, of which the network includes the blood capillaries or the blood vessels that are found scattered inside the skin, supplying food and nutrients, and as well removing waste. We also saw the hair follicles found in them that come as a result of the infolding of the Malpighian layer. And then we saw also the sebaceous gland, which secretes an important oil within the body known as sebum that helps the skin to be supple. We also saw among the connective tissues found in the dermis, we were able to look at the erector muscles that arises or attach to the hair follicle. We also looked at the subcutaneous tissue, or the one we call fatty tissue, or adipose tissue that tend to insulate the skin or help it to carry out its function. We saw as well the sensory receptors or the sensory nerve endings that helps the skin to take messages when there is problem to the brain or to the nervous system, get it interpreted and transferred to the appropriate quarters. I want to believe you actually understand. Like I said, if there's anything you don't understand, please call my attention by sending your message to AGS Senior School Online at gmail.com. I still remain your biology teacher, Ms. Anya Ii. God bless you. I love you. I want to believe you're making good of this period to achieve what you want. You must not fail biology in YF. God bless you. Love you so much.